Instead of saying, here's who might win the election, this media said, here's who should win the election. Forget catering to the higher minds and being balanced. Make it black and white, good guys, bad guys, sensationalize things that help the narrative, downplay things that don't. We haven't even gotten to the Wild West yet. AI is the ultimate example. It's going to do wonders and also awful things. All around the country right now, you would hear an argument that just sounds almost exactly the same. What happened here to make this crazy change? Like, this is not 2020 anymore.
Those angry posts will get far more traction.
I got scolded by the audience, but it was the right scolding from the right people. That's exactly what I want. Look, what I really do isn't non-political stuff. What I do is I'm just myself.
All right, Tim Urban, thank you for taking the time. It's good to see your face. You've written a book that purports to diagnose a problem. So, Tim, what's our problem?
Well, I felt like we were like Benjamin buttoning our society's age, maturity-wise, and it felt like everyone was becoming more tribal and more irrational and angrier. The news was becoming lower quality and less trustworthy, and the politicians were becoming more clownish with less integrity, and elections were becoming less trusted. And it was like the machine that we're in, the screws were coming loose. It's like society was sick. Things are going in the wrong direction. And, you know, things are supposed to go in the other direction, right? You're supposed to, oh, wow, like when I was a kid, our technology was much worse and we knew much less and we were more bigoted. But now, we have the fancier phones and we know more about the, quantum world, and we're being more grown up. And you should be horrified by looking back at how things were 30 or 40 years ago and saying, oh my God, I can't believe that was only 30 or 40 years ago. But in this kind of social, political aspect, it felt like everything was going in the wrong direction. So I asked, what's our problem? So that's what I spent many years working on, as did you.
I have also gotten a similar sort of top level question on, so what is the outrage machine, Tobias? Like, the answer is there's a book for that.
And specifically, it's not just, this is also a book. It's that normally I'm a blogger. So my thing is writing articles, not books. And this was the first time I wrote a book because it felt like I can't answer this in one article. It was going to be, a series. It was, and I realized the series itself was going to be like 20 long posts. So it was about halfway through, and I was thinking, I can't ask people to sit there at the computer for however long it is, 10, 15 hours and read this. Like there is a technology out there, books and audiobooks and ebooks, that is made for something this long, and it's not a browser. I could do it in an article, but it wouldn't get the job done, is how I felt. Totally. I think you probably came to the same conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I love about your book is that you expand the one-dimensionality of our political discourse, and you are on one side of the spectrum, the left or the right. Maybe you can just explain that particular piece of it, the high-rung thinking, and how it differs from traditional partisan politics and conversation.
I realized that a big part of the problem was that our discussions, the words we used, were all one-dimensional. Left, far left, center, right, far right, whatever. That's a horizontal, one-dimensional axis. And I realized that there's just more going on, and that what people are trying to describe, I think, when they say the far left or the far right, isn't actually the far left and the far right. And centrist, people say someone's centrist. I don't think they're actually what they're getting at isn't someone whose views are halfway in between, or even someone whose views are average to halfway in between. It was something else. And that the horizontal axis is a good description of what you think about society and politics and your philosophies. And that's what you think. And that's important. But what I think needed to be discussed even more was how you think and how you interact, and how much your thinking is based on emotions or primal limbic system kind of thinking versus what I would call higher-minded kind of rational, outside of your little perspective thinking. So I just laid down a vertical axis to go along with it. I made the ladder because there's really a spectrum, but I was like, what are some rungs of this ladder? And the way I kind of defined it was, I think there's kind of two minds going on in our heads, and you see this all over your life. There's the part of you that says, I really want to just like binge on this unhealthy food. And then there's some other part of you that says, no, And it's like, what's going on there? Why do we ever binge on unhealthy food if we or don't want to? And it's because there's two minds going on, arguing with each other. And one is this kind of primitive animal, as a primate we're all inside of, that doesn't have an ability to think big picture, long term, understand really consequences, and is just running on ancient programming. And ancient programming says if that brownie is sweet and dense and calorie dense, and it tastes delicious, and I crave it, so I should eat it, because in the ancient world where that part of your brain evolved, you should eat the dense, the fig or the date you find on the tree that tastes a little like like a brownie today. I mean, you eat that. Yeah, eat as many as you can, because that's great. That's life. That's survival calories. And you don't know when the next time you're going to get to it is. But then we have this other part of our brain that can see the reality and says, wait a second, we're not in 50,000 BC. Wait, we're not at a shortage of calories. We can eat, we have more than enough there. And actually, our problem is too many calories now. And you're also going to feel bad after you eat this. You're going to feel both bad about yourself, but also you're going to physically feel bad. And so let's not do it. And so we all understand that, right? We all have that experience. And I think that when we think about our beliefs, our values, our political, a lot of this is centered around politics. If I wrote this in a different time, it might be centered around religious thoughts in a different part of the world or a different time, or ethnic tension or whatever. In this case, it seems to be our problem centered around it's manifesting in political tribalism. And I realize that these same two parts of the brain are arguing about how we think, how we form our beliefs, how we have discourse, how we talk, how we vote. And the part that wants to eat the brownie, I call the primitive mind. And just like it has strong opinions about what to eat, it also has strong opinions about the political tribe that it's in and what's right and wrong, but both factually and morally, and who the good guys are and the bad guys. And it's a very black and white, us versus them mindset. And we all have that in us, just like we all have the desire to eat junk food. We all have this same part of our brain being very simplistic. And just like it feels good to eat junk food in that moment, it feels great to have a team, my team, the good guys, and the perfectly righteous good guys who are right about everything, the smart people. And then there's those people. They're the reason everything's bad. They're dangerous. They're stupid. They're morally bad and bordering on evil. And I hate them. And they're the other people. And we dehumanize them. And that's the brownie eating part of our brain that does that. And then there's this other part of our brain that does know better, that says, actually, whenever I've met a person, gotten to know them, I see a complex three-dimensional person, and the issues in our country are incredibly complex. There is no obvious right answer. And like my team is doing a lot of the same crap that their team was. And if I were born in that circle, I would hate my team just as much as I hate their team. And none of that actually makes sense. It's a very childish way to think. And this isn't who I am. I'm evolved beyond this. And the times when I feel so certain about every single opinion I have on politics, well, that's not right. That's not wise, because I know that from other parts of my life that getting to the truth about complex issues is hard. And the truth is I probably don't know very much about most of this. And I should say I don't know a lot, like I do in other things. I don't know how an airplane engine works. I'm not going to have a strong opinion on one kind of airplane engine versus another, because I don't know much about it. And so I probably shouldn't know that. Say I know that much about our tax policy or our immigration policy or our foreign policy and things like that. It's complex. So since both of these are in both of our heads, you can put the higher mind at the top of the axis and the primitive mind at the bottom. And it's that tug of war in your head, just like you have the tug of war about whether I should eat the brownie. There's a tug of war going on, and which brain is doing the thinking? Who's in charge in there, holding the wheel of our mind? And just like we have times when you're going to be really bad about your diet for a few weeks because the primitive mind is just taking the wheel in that tug of war. And other times you've been great. You've just been a real grown-up because the higher mind is in control. Same thing with politics. Depending on the time, the season, our mood that day, the things you've been reading on social media that day, that hour, we're going to feel much more in our higher mind or much more in our primitive mind or somewhere maybe in the middle. So when we're really thinking with our higher mind, when that's doing most of the work, we're at the top of the top rung. And as you go down, you get to the place where you really are fully just at the whim of your primitive mind. And the higher mind is you can't even hear it. And you forget that you even have these two minds. And you're just so sure you're right. You're so angry and whatever. We're a very social species. So whatever we do is very tied to what other people do. So there are actual cultures in friend groups and marriages and universities and your wider cultures in your city or your country. And they the higher minds in a culture can team up and create a high-rung culture where it's cool to think high-rung and it's socially pressured to stay up there. And other ones where the opposite, where everyone's primitive mind is just out, and that's like pheromones, contagious, and you start doing it too, and you want to suddenly not disagree with the group because you want to be popular and you want to be one of the good guys, and it's so it's very tied into that too. And then when I looked at the whole axis, I realized, okay, so what we have is not left, right, and center. What we have is upper right and upper center and upper left and lower right and lower center and lower left, and that we need to discuss this as quadrants as opposed to a straight line. So that's the core kind of framework that I start the book with, because that's how I started to think about it. And then the rest of the book, I discuss all the things that you would expect me to discuss: the history of politics and social media and the current moment and stuff going on in universities or in the election or the stuff going on in the woke movement or Trump's MAGA movement or whatever. And that, instead of just discussing it normally, I would discuss it through this lens. I would use this terminology because you can actually see what's going on and actually have better discussions if you can, I think, have a better framework.
I'm curious how much you would prescribe or ascribe the current dysfunction to social media versus other forces that are at play. If you had to put a percentage on it, how much is due directly to social media versus these other kind of dynamics in play for the last 50 plus years?
Yeah, I think the way I would describe it is there's a phenomenon that social media is part of, and the phenomenon itself is more of what I would ascribe it to, and social media is a major manifestation of that phenomenon. And the phenomenon is, so I'm I'm writing a different thing, and it has to do with, this big history and a lot of other things. But I was actually just recently writing about the Industrial Revolution. And I was like, what's really at the core here? What happened here to make this crazy change? And it really boils down to this kind of crazy invention, the steam engine, that what we have is we had a giant ocean of heat energy underground. We could burn coal and get heat. So you can you can warm your house with that or cook your food or whatever. But there's a limit on how much we need heat for. And then there was all these other industries where they might need a little heat if you're, I don't know, melting metal or whatever. But mostly what they need is movement. You need to crank the cranks of the textile machines that were built and all the other industries that kind of boomed around that time. They needed human labor cranking machines or water wheels, because you can take the kinetic energy of a river and you can convert it to kinetic energy of a crank. So the water literally is moving and then it pushes the wheel, which turns the thing, right? So the steam engine was so crazy because it was the first time we could convert heat energy to movement. And suddenly we said, well, we have a giant ocean of fire underground, and now we can convert fire to movement. So now we have endless movement. And suddenly all these industries mechanized, and all these machines were built, and all this innovation went in because the innovation didn't have anywhere to anything to do with itself before. What are we going to do when all you have to use water wheels? Well, now any factory anywhere can suddenly have cranks going. So what can we do with cranks? Okay, so I say that as a kind of an analogy for what I think is the phenomenon here, which is, I think that the internet in general, and started with the internet, but really the first kind of, I think I would say, began with maybe right-wing talk radio, and then MSNBC and Fox News, and this was a different kind of media. It was media that instead of saying here's what we think is true, instead of saying here's what you should think is true, instead of saying here's who might win the election, this media said here's who should win the election. Here's who the whole audience and us, all the anchors, will want to win the election. Totally different. Then social media comes out and starts off as a nice thing, as you of course know. It starts off and it's people sharing pictures and connecting with their friends, and it was fun. It's like it was a lot of like love almost. It was like I do this embarrassing thing. Oh, me too. Ha ha ha. We make fun of each other, make fun of ourselves. It was nice. And then it turned tribal, very tribal and very nasty. And I think that what's happening in both of these cases is if the steam engine converted heat to movement and then an explosion of innovation, I think that the internet kind of opened a way to convert tribalism into money. And Fox News got incredibly popular because instead of telling the news, which produces some money, let's stoke tribalism. Let's feed it. Let's cater to it. And they got really rich. And Rush Limbaugh got really rich. And Jon Stewart on The Daily Show got really popular. And social media comes around. And, Mark Zuckerberg and the people at Twitter and other places realized if you put this like button and the algorithm just is going to favor engagement. But turns out anger and tribal anger really gets engagement. So it's not that they said, let's convert anger but they told the algorithm, make us money. And the algorithm discovered pretty quickly that we can convert anger here into money. And Mark Zuckerberg became one of the richest people on earth, right? And so did all the people who own social media. These companies became unbelievably huge and relevant and important, for better or worse. So I think social media was a huge part of it, but I think it's really the bigger phenomenon that there was kind of a steam engine of tribalism that was created that was able to convert the primitive mind style political thinking into money. Forget catering to the higher minds and being balanced and telling, a nuanced story. Can make it black and white, good guys, bad guys, and always just sensationalize things that help the narrative, downplay things that don't. And then the traditional media, and to keep up, basically started doing this too. And you have all this traditional media becoming way less professional, way more biased, having way more of a political agenda, telling you who you should vote for, way more than telling you who might win and what the different issues are. And so I think it was kind of a big trend that social media turned into be one of the most important levers of that trend and drivers of it. And it was incredibly powerful because unlike traditional media, where at least it's only the journalists who really are able to take their political thoughts and do something with it, everyone else was kind of yelling at no one in the comments section. Suddenly social media, wow, a really provocative tribal person can get a huge following in social media, and now the media doesn't want to piss them off because they're really powerful. So then the traditional media started being scared of social media. So we can talk about that forever and all the things, and you're the expert on all that. But that's what I would say. I would say social media is an example of something that was a bigger trend. Is your conclusion that social media is itself a major driver as its own phenomenon, or do you think it's part of something bigger that was happening, and if it wasn't social media, something else would have done it, or is social media special?
I would pick the number at 80%. I think that social media is 80% of the problem. I think it's power law sort of distribution of influence in our current political system and dynamics. And I think that if you remove social media from the equation, you would still have partisan media, but I don't think it would be as perniciously influential as social media is, because social media is something very deep to us as individuals, right? Versus the consumption of traditional media, which is you still have people going to a single source of knowledge or opinion, and there's been histories of propaganda and influence that come with this kind of narrowcast media, as you call it, right, in the past, and we've gone through iterations of that in the past. I think social media does something that's just very unique, and it's clearly not 100% of it, but I do think I think it's closer to 80, in that it actually changes our personal consumption patterns of information in relationship to other people, that other people won't have the same patterns at all, right? So you have this personalized set of things that will make you, and specifically you, angry about a set of topics that the algorithm has found that trigger you, right? So I think you're right in that, turning attention into money, or anger into money, tribalism into money, outrage into money. a psychologist named Dr. Burnett, who talks about how our attention is being fracked, essentially, right? It's like fracking. And I think it's a decent analogy per the relationship with coal. And we frack hydrocarbons underneath the earth. We're fracking our attention these days and trying to find all of the ways in which your attention can be incrementalized and turned into small additional chunks of ad revenue. I think there's something so unique and individualized about social media that makes it that much more dangerous and problematic than traditional media. Because I think that in traditional media, you would still have a little bit of a dialectic, even if it was tribal, which it absolutely is. If you look at Fox News, if you look at MSNBC, they are very tribal. There is still the single point versus the other point, and it is binary, but you don't have this just individual radicalization that is quite as powerful and pernicious. I think that the way that social media affects traditional media is the hidden part of the conversation that no one really talks about, in that, both from a cancellation perspective, like traditional media doesn't want to offend certain groups, so it changes editorial bent and it will cancel and shut out certain perspectives. But I think there's something really key there, which is when your brain is bathed in the social metrics of a social media environment when it comes to certain issues, it really does rewire your brain, right? And this is important for you, Tim. You've been very active on social media. You've built a following, and I think that you've actually done a pretty good job historically at tacking to a very particular personal algorithm of consuming content, posting stuff that you find interesting, having discourse and dialogue with people that are maybe trying to kind of advance the conversation, trying in general to be more high-minded with your social media posts. But that's not the default. I think the default is really much more, if you are angry about something and you post something, studies show that those angry posts will get far more traction than other posts, right? Far more traction in a way that it actually trains us through that posting, the response from people around you. You'll go viral for that angry outrage post much more likely than you would be going viral for a slightly traditionally a nice thing that you said on social media or a more insightful thing that you said. The angry thing is most likely to get action. And the result of that is that it actually trains us to do that more and more. And that's quantitative at this point in time. There's a dramatic increase in the amount of outrage posting that we do. And that that messes with us collectively, right? That really does change our minds.
I feel like, to break down that statement of how it trains us, what I think it really is you can say boil it down to three kinds of people who would post on social media. There's people who simply do not want to post tribal, angry stuff. It's just not what they do. There's people who that's all they want to do. That's their purpose of social media. And then there's a group who they're driven by, they want followers. They don't care how they get them. And so what I think it does is, when the algorithm started really favoring that, and then in turn not favoring the other stuff, that first group who just doesn't want to post that stuff, they get discouraged and bummed out, but then they're not getting much traction, and they eventually they leave, or they just post less. They see it all in their timeline, they don't want it, or they get intimidated and they just get quiet. The people who love posting it, they were always posting it. They were always going to post it. But they become way more famous, and their posts are way more prominent. So that just raises all of them, and that whole group becomes way more influential, while the first group becomes way less influential. But then there's the group who just wants to be popular, and that's the group that is trained. That's the group that they see, they understand, they're always A/B testing without even thinking about it, and they start posting the outragey stuff. That's what I see. I think it's a double thing, and it kicks some people out and boosts some others, while then the big group who just wants followers, they get trained. And if the algorithm changed and started penalizing that stuff somehow, that first group would come back, they would be encouraged. The second group would be discouraged, they'd have less fun, they'd leave, or they would just be less heard. And then that middle group would all start trying to be nice and thoughtful, because they'd be mocked if they weren't. So either the algorithm or just the culture itself can play a role in incentives here.
I'm thinking back to the earliest days of these outrage cascades really starting to dominate our national politics. And I think they really started it was 2013, I think roughly 2012, 2013 is when they started to explode and expand in a meaningful way and change the way that we think and talk and have discourse. But per these different groups, I think you mentioned 3 different groups, the people that just want to be popular, I would argue that per the us versus them thing, I think that's arguably still all of us, right? Like, that's one of the more pernicious things about social media, is that it has infected so many of our conversations online and off. And I'm remembering the very earliest days where, I posted right around when Trump was first elected. I was really disheartened by his treatment of women. And I posted something on social media. I was just like angry about it. And I posted something on social media being like, to all the women in my life, I'm so upset by this. And I want you to know that you're loved and respected and all this stuff. And I was very upset by that. And that particular tweet, or no, it wasn't a tweet, it was a Facebook post. It went like bananas viral. And like it shifted me in a way that I wasn't conscious of at the time. I wouldn't say that I'm one of those people that is like, maybe I'm going to try to get some more followers over here. I try to really extricate myself from a lot of those dynamics and influences. But at the same time, like the signal from that was so powerful. I'm like, oh, I should be more like this person that was angry and upset, because there was this powerful response from my community around that. Strong enough signal. And the metrics and the game mechanics of social media have infiltrated our lives in such a significant way. And we're on these tools constantly, right? Even if you're not posting on a regular basis, you're still consuming media through it. And like information doesn't just stay on social media, right? It jumps into our friend's brain and they tell us about it over coffee, or it jumps into our parents' brain somehow, or it jumps into Fox News, and then Fox News tells our grandparents about it. And then so the information is not in a bubble on social media. Mm-mm. It's like the extremity, the temperature has been turned up everywhere. And the result of that is that our whole information environment has gotten hotter. Yeah.
Yeah. Like just hearing what you're saying there, I'm thinking about my own posting. Yeah. I think it's okay. It's good to like see that there's 2 different incentive forces here. One is algorithmic and the other is culture. And so you posting that, both systems rewarded you, I imagine. I imagine that people in your life are like, amazing post, right? Who doesn't love that post?
Yeah.
Unless they're a hardcore MAGA person, and you probably don't know too many of those. Or at least, hardcore enough that they would be like, what? Like, Trump doesn't have anything bad to say about women. You probably don't know many of those. So you probably got good feedback in your life and from your friends, people you know. And the algorithm was like, look at this. I'm realizing that I don't feel like the incentives are pushing me to be really tribal on social media, and it's just my own high-minded integrity that doesn't do that. Because I don't think that's what's going on. But I feel this urge not to do too much of that, and I'm realizing why. And it's because the algorithm would absolutely, especially on the new X really buries people like me. It really, because the For You page is what people are mostly on, and that really favors political outrage right now. And I know that's something that like Elon is specifically trying to figure out how to, because it's going to favor the posts that you forward or that you copy and share, and those are often things you hate. So it's showing people a lot of things that make them angry. So I know that I could blow up my posts by being really political. And I think the thing that's pushing back on it for me is a cultural thing that is stronger than it used to be, which is that if I start doing that, I know that the people I respect, my friends and my core readers, they're all going to look at that and be like, what happened to Tim? He's not being Tim. He's being so lame. Ugh, like really? You're like diving into the culture war? And I think that's really great. That I think there's a culture now, at least among people I know, and that's got to be a lot of other people feel that they're inside of a culture that's changed in this way, where it's really uncool. Everyone at this point, everyone knows that everyone has the term culture war. You're really like in the culture war. You're really like stoking. I think books like yours help people to have this language to say, wait a second, like this is an outrage machine, and like, wow, you're feeding it. So I feel that there's a nice other incentive, at least again in my world, to not do that. Because yes, I'll get more traction, but at what expense? At the expense of losing respect to the people I care about. And I think that the people who really today do that, probably either they're so geared towards followers and that just matters more than anything, or they're making a lot of money off of their followers and that's just their living. Or more likely, they're surrounded by a world where everyone they know is like, yeah, love that post today, get them. And I think that maybe in 2016, my world would have been more like that. And I think today people are like, ugh, like, what are you doing? You're like being one of these Twitter people. But I don't think one of these Twitter people was even like a thing in 2016, 2017, as it is right now. So that gives me some hope, maybe, that if the algorithms, I'd love them to change, but if they don't, maybe the culture can, like, for example, it's not just algorithms. Like, a lot of women could get really rich posing nude online, right? Posting bikini photos all day on Instagram. And most of them don't, because even though they had like followers, they don't want to do it that way. And they'd also think, what would everyone think of me? I'd be talked about so much. And so there's this, it's not just, the algorithm alone isn't enough. It has to be that it's culturally cool too. And I think when the culture turns, you'll find that it's like, yeah, of course I could get traction that way, but I would never do that. I'm not that kind of person. I don't want people to think I'm that kind of person. So maybe maybe it's moving in that direction, or maybe that's too hopeful. I don't know.
So I think that's a rosy and optimistic take. I think what has shifted since 2016 is that we're talking a second about the dialectic, right? These kind of big swings in public perception about what these things do and what these things are about. Your book, and I think your book did this very well, which was to, I think, rather courageously dive into some of these hypocrisies and difficulties of the woke movement and also the fundamental conservative movement and just the fundamentalism on both sides, and try to unpack those and say, hey, look, no, both of these are actually bad. There's a whole bunch of craziness happening here that really we shouldn't pay attention to. And that, I think that does like speak to a point in the dialectic where we're like, George Floyd, oh my gosh, like police violence, all these things, sexism, Me Too, everything. This, like, the world is falling apart here. And we're like, okay, actually, maybe it's not falling apart quite as much as we thought. I started to swing back the other direction a bit. And I think that we're in the middle of one of those swings where we're starting to see some of the extremes of the last decade for what they are, which is really extremes, right? And I think that we do have a bit of a language about that. What I'm noting right now is that our politics hasn't recovered yet, right? Our politics is not at a point where it's making sense completely again, right? I think Sam Harris talks about this on a regular basis, but like Trump, he is a break glass in case of emergency candidate for so many people, right? People that I consider friends who are more and more Trump curious, and they correlate directly with people that are more and more online and more on social media, I think, largely. And that there is this, and Fox News, sure, of course, but I think there's this attenuation to a certain type of fear and threats that are in the world. And if you believe those threats, then Trump actually makes a lot of sense, right? If you believe the kind of basket of stories, of like really scary stories that his movement is promulgating, then like he absolutely makes sense as a candidate, right? If this is the last election, if we have all of these issues that are voting, if we have all these issues of the system itself, and like, yeah, he actually makes sense as a candidate. And I think that explains a lot of the shift amongst some tech entrepreneurs that I think we both know towards that support. But there is something about that particular algorithm. When I mean by algorithm, I don't mean just rank ordering of content in our feeds. I mean almost a pattern of information consumption that thrives on our low-rung thinking, right? Like there's this thing there that just like a algorithm is like focusing on that particular part of ourselves. Like, you are right. Your lower primitive brain, you are correct in being terrified about the world, and you should listen to it, and you should act upon these threats and these fears on a regular basis. And I have this like secondary layer here, which is a little bit speculative, but I think important to maybe think about, which is that the way an algorithm operates is this package of information that serves us content or serves us information in a consistent way that's applied to rules, right? So there's a set of instructions around that, a preconditioned set of instructions around that determine how we operate and how we think. The Twitter algorithm, the same way, Instagram, TikTok, all of these things are the same way. They're just like, they're different forms of the same kind of algorithm of information serving machines. I wonder if there's almost a viral component to it. I don't mean like stuff that goes viral online, but I mean like a virus is a package of information, and it is not alive, but it's a package of biological material. It's not like traditionally alive. It just reproduces because it can. It knows how to reproduce. It infects a cell and makes the cell explode and share that information. I think there's something similar happening with these various conspiracy, outrage inducing algorithms, and that they're almost like viruses that have infected the hosts and that have forced them to spew out their same algorithm for sharing threats and hyper partisan viral information. It's kind of a scary frame, but I think it actually fits. Like, we've discovered something with this hyper-partisan, low-rung sort of viral algorithm that is actually infecting the brains of other people. And it's a little bit edgy, because I don't want to say, oh, like everyone that disagrees with me has a virus. Elon calls it a woke mind virus. I think it's not too dissimilar from the hyper-partisan virus on the right that is also making these kind of crazy assertions and prioritization of certain threats that aren't based in factual reality. And I think it's kind of a similar imbalance and pathology, potentially.
I would agree with all that. I also would add that I see at this point. So I used to, in 2012, basically 90% of my friends were like, go Obama, the right sucks. And I had a couple of very conservative friends that were always very interesting to talk to for me because it was different. Now I feel like my friends are all over the place. But I see these viruses as quite similar, and they've both paint a similar desperate times call for desperate measures picture, and this is a war of good and evil, a war of survival. I like to follow a huge range of people on Twitter, so I don't fall into any one. I want to hear both viruses at least, so I can pretty well know what the viruses say. I could play the role of a hardcore Trump person and say all the things in good steelman faith. And likewise, I could play the role of someone who thinks that the worst thing that could happen is Trump in good faith. I could be them. I could act as them. And what's interesting is, like you said, I think that if you went into dinner tables or forums, online forums or whatever, all around the country right now, you would hear an argument that it sounds almost exactly the same. They're saying these 7 points, and they're saying these 7 points, and they've been trained on. And what you're really seeing is the virus is arguing. The two viruses are fighting in their hosts. That the viruses are in the hosts of the humans all over the country and in the media and all this. And the viruses themselves is kind of a war of not two candidates as much as two, and which one can get more votes out in a way. And the truth is, in today's landscape, Trump, of course, is going to be an especially inflammatory figure, but Trump's rise is a symptom of the times. I wouldn't be surprised if in 4 years you have two candidates and either one or both are just as inflammatory as Trump, and you have a similar thing. And I think maybe the new thing is that elections come down to this, at least until something changes. Then 2028 is also going to be the end of the world if my candidate doesn't win. And it'll be the battle of viruses again until something about this current system changes.
I'm trying to stay in my high-rung thinking here when I'm examining the differences. I think one of the things you mentioned in your book is like the danger of both sidesism, right? When it comes to this, and like being called a both sidesist is its own kind of insult these days, right? So there's claims on both sides. There's claims, and those claims have degrees of truth or not. Right? Like that you have a claim, it can be true, it can be false. And you tally those up on either side, and then you get a potential balance of like which side is arguably or objectively hewing closer to the contours of reality. And then you should be able to make a judgment about where you should be voting based on the kind of the quantity of accurate versus inaccurate claims. Right. That is, first of all, very difficult to do in the age of social media, right? But I think one of the primary differences between now and the previous era of our politics, the one that we grew up in and that was kind of the water that we were swimming in since birth, is that claims used to be more aggressively fact-checked. And there was a system in place to filter out the bullshit and the egregious claims. There was problems with the system, and I think that traditional media did have too much power, and then I just have this monopoly on broadcast, right? They did have this monopoly on the evaluation of claims and the prioritization of claims and like what type of stories went above the fold and all of those things. But I think one of the primary shifts in social media, and I think it's important to note that there's a lot of things that change with social media. It's not just one thing. We have this impulse to try to point at one specific thing. We're like, oh, it's the metrics on social media. Oh, it's the algorithm on social media, whatever it is. It's actually a whole range of behavior changes, because we've gone from living in this world of kinetic objects and like physical exchange to living a huge portion of our internal lives on social media. Like we're always in these other rooms. We're always in these other spaces. The fact that like I've checked my phone, I have 17 messages in this WhatsApp group and all these notifications, like our brains are already in the metaverse, right? And that shift in the same way that like our current world, our physical kinetic world is actually very messy and has a whole bunch of weird laws and rules that we've built up over centuries to make it clean and tidy and make sure that people don't die on the street because of speeding cars and there's crosswalks. That took a long time for us to update this kinetic world, this physical world, to actually be safe for humans, right?
Mm.
And similarly, now we're in the metaverse and like we're in this giant industrial city. It's basically an industrial slum that was built overnight, ostensibly for 4 billion humans that now live there. And there's just like none of these guardrails that are really set up. We have some loose ones, but they're mostly just garbage. And people are just like crashing into each other and causing catastrophes and appealing to our travel minds and like turning into cesspools constantly. So the question is, how do we take this kind of current world, the lessons from this current world, and translate them into this metaverse that we are now living in? And I think one of the core pieces of that is the process of basic verification of information, right? So there's some recent studies on polygraph tests, for instance, right? So like polygraphs, we used to think there's like, oh, there's a standard. You could take a polygraph test, tell whether or not people are lying. And then we figure out that's bullshit. You can't tell if people are lying through a polygraph. There's a whole bunch of other things that have come up since then, people like tools and tricks to try to figure out if people are lying. Turns out like almost none of them work. Like we're actually very bad at telling whether or not people are lying. What actually works is fact checking. What actually works is verifying what people say. And that is one of the kind of core primary ways we've ever figured out as a species to actually determine what is true and what is not true. Because people are very good at lying to themselves and to each other, right? Like we're really, really good at that. So having a system in place, which is what we actually built with the core tenets of our old media system, which is like a bunch of corroboration, a culture of journalism historically, which was, I'm going to like you said something, cool. Like I'm going to check that. I'm going to check it, not just one person, I'm going to check it with 2 other people or maybe 3 other people just to make sure that's not a problem, because my reputation as a person, as a journalist, and also as a paper or as a broadcaster is on the line as a result of that. And we don't have that currently with social media. In fact, we have the inverse, which is the more inflammatory the thing that you say, it doesn't matter how accurate it is, the more likely you are to get engagement from it and to get paid. And like to actually get physically paid. Like the fact that you can now just say a total fabrication and get a check in the mail, that is a new low, I think, in terms of our media ecology and how it works and how healthy for us. So that's the one kind of shift or difference that I'd say is if we were to put these 2 things into baskets of the 2 viruses, right? One virus is, I think, arguably, and per our ability to actually check it, going to say things that are measurably more true than the other virus.
I like what you mean. I like the way you described it, that there's like a new landscape comes. It's the Wild West. And then slowly we figure out guardrails and we figure out how to live there safely and productively. And I agree that it feels like we're in that Wild West phase right now. And truth, I think, used to be, if ABC, NBC, and CBS are the 3 news stations, and one of them is wrong more than the others, it's going to be known over time. This is going to become the laughingstock station. No one wants that. So there was an incentive to try to tell the truth. And I think that incentive isn't there, partially because tribalism is on the rise and people are less concerned with truth, but even more so because it's harder to verify, like you said. And I am heartened a little bit by like community notes. Say, for all the things you can complain about with X, community notes is great. Now, you have to, the question is about the biases of community notes, but it's a step in the right direction where a lot of really inflammatory big accounts saying something, and then community notes comes out and is like, actually, this picture wasn't even from this war. It was from right? I mean, and that suddenly, that embarrasses them. And community notes provides a little bit of incentive to tell the truth. It wasn't there before. Or to just fact check first. If you retweet something that then gets community noted, it's a little embarrassing. Your readers might say, oh, wow, this guy just like retweets without like. So I wonder if that's the beginning, the first step in what can be a collective human / AI verification system that starts to be laid on top of news articles, social media posts and then you can, of course, have metrics, oh, this journalist gets really consistently bad. This journalist's score over many articles is low. Okay, that's dings their whole reputation. Right now, they're not, that journalist isn't getting any. So I wonder if, again, maybe Community Notes is the beginning of something. AI is getting more powerful every year. And I wonder if maybe we could get back to that where you could use this fancy tech that gave us social media. You can also start to use it to create very good verification systems that are trusted eventually. They're going to have their own problems, but they get better and better. And that restores order a little bit. It brings the incentive for truth back and the disincentive to just say something sensational that's totally untrue. So I hope that's what happens. Do you see that? Is that, again, me being overly optimistic? Or is it like, do you see maybe in 2030, oh, you know what? Like, this is not 2020 anymore. You cannot just go and start lying online, or you will be very quickly embarrassed by the systems. And you want to get good scores, good accuracy scores from these verification systems, these many systems that are out there.
I think I am also very hopeful about that. I think that building those systems needs to be a priority for every social media platform, right? I think that's really important. I think Community Notes is absolutely one of the best early kind of zygotes of a antibody, right? Of like a immune system that we have in our current information environment or ecology. There's something that large language models do really well that wasn't possible even 4 years ago, 5 years ago, is that they can take claims and extract and match them with a database of facts or of other information very quickly and easily. And that's something that I'm really heartened by, is basically claim extraction, which was very hard semantically to do previously, right? So we have all these fact-checking organizations, you have claims, so a politician will make a claim, but they'll make it in a different kind of frame of reference, they'll say it in a different way, or they'll cite something else and it won't get matched to the fact check correctly. That's something that actually the LLMs can do really well now, that they just wasn't physically possible before. So I'm actually hopeful that we could build some models around that. And I do think that if we were to build fact checking and reputation management into social media and link those things together, then you would have a very steady and fairly fast shift in the type of behavior that people participate in online in terms of sharing falsehoods.
I mean, imagine when you start having if Community Notes is the very beginning of a system that gets much more robust and is able to actually give an accuracy score or a bias score, whatever, to accounts. And then you can start filtering and say, I only want to see on my timeline people that have over an 80% accuracy. Right. And suddenly the people who are lower accuracy are getting increasingly filtered out. It's harder to get attention. And their audience is increasingly made up of just the people who are the most tribal. And they lose a bunch of the freer thinkers out there. And I can see technology working in our favor here. The way this is often the case. New technology both has really amazing benefits and really bad harms, and sometimes it's the battle of those two things: nuclear weapons, but also maybe preventing World War III or nuclear energy. AI is the ultimate example. Of course, it's going to do wonders and also do awful things. And AI, I would argue, by the way, the landscape is just being built. We haven't even gotten to the Wild West yet. We're very early. So if it's like you go from innovation, Wild West, and then like it settles into a place of safeguards that's good to, the Industrial Revolution, to bring that back. Innovation, all these factories, you have children working 16 hours a day and dying of cholera in factories. Then suddenly you start to have child labor laws, and you start to have trade unions, and these things that slowly make working conditions better.
That'd be TikTok, right? Today, it's like we have child labor, like algorithmic child labor that people are doing on TikTok.
Oh, sure. Yeah, because in the new landscape, there's no guardrail, so all the same problems happen.
Right.
And child exploitation and all these other things. But I would say social media, we're squarely in phase 2. We are in the Wild West, and maybe we're even starting to have some guardrails, starting to move into that third stage. While AI, I think the catastrophes haven't even really started yet, and let alone the guardrails. So it's just got me thinking. I think it's an interesting kind of framework.
I think this is actually arguably going to be the primary test for whether or not our democratic system can continue to thrive, is like this proportion of garbage information over verified information. Like if we can't do that, that's how democracies fail, right? It's like if you misprioritize problems and you collectively focus on the wrong issues, then you're going to solve the wrong problem. You're going to make a whole bunch of people mad process. And that's what democracies are. They're basically giant problem-solving machines, right? And so if your problem detection mechanism is out of whack, then your democracy is going to eventually fail and spin out. Like, you've been an active social media participant for a long time. You have a pretty large following. Again, I think that in general, your stuff has been actually really insightful and helpful. Most of the time when I see your content, I'm like, I'm really glad I saw that. Like, thanks, Tim.
Good. It's people like you that I'm doing it for. It's like I'm trying to do to people who I'd be friends with or who I am friends with. It's like that's who I have in mind. So when someone like you says that means a lot. Thanks.
Totally. Like, you're running, your own personal algorithm when you are determining what to post and what to say. What kind of decisions, what is the mental process that you go through when you are posting? Like, if you were to break that down into a set of steps or a set of kind of questions that you ask yourself when you're about to post or when you see something, like, what would that be?
Yeah, I don't strategize too hard with social media. I mean, mostly I use X, a little bit Instagram, but what ends up happening is whatever I'm currently writing about is what I'm thinking about a lot. And what I don't want to I want to post something that gave me a dopamine hit when I thought of it or when I came across it. That's how I do my articles too. If I find that I'm researching something and it's fascinating, okay, I should write about that because my readers will probably like it too. And with social media, it's if I come across a post that makes me that I'm just delighted by, I'll probably retweet it. And if I'm writing about something, I'm right now, I can't stop talking about the steam engine because I just researched it. That's why I bring it into this conversation. And if we were talking 3 months ago, I would have been talking about Mesopotamia and the advent of writing. And so when I'm writing about something, my mind's going on it. And that's usually the tweets are going to come out are going to reflect what I'm thinking about a lot, either a conversation I just had or writing. So my last book, What's Our Problem, was all about politics, tribalism. And I tweeted a lot about that kind of stuff. Got a lot of people angry and other people, I got a lot of new followers and whatever. And I'm doing a lot less of that now. And actually, I think someone asked me, oh, did you tamp that down because you want to be less controversial? And the truth is, no, I'm just not the thing that I'm constantly thinking about now. So a lot more of my content that I'm going to post is just going to be related to whatever I'm writing about right now. If I'm going to tweet about something controversial, I really want to understand it. I want to be able to, if I tweet about something, even though it's only a short thing, I want to feel like I could happily go on a stage in front of a big group of people and debate that thing, or just discuss it publicly in front of do a big Q&A about what I think about that. And so when I was writing about political tribalism or like wokeness, or what I saw as like the low-rung right-wing movement, I tweeted about that stuff because I was like, I really have thought about this and I know a lot about it. And I'm happy to talk a lot more about this. In fact, I'm writing a whole book on it. Another example right now is Israel-Palestine, right? One of the hottest issues and something that I of course, have thoughts on, but I'm not writing about it right now. I haven't done a deep dive. And so, I feel like my thoughts are going to be more derivative of stuff I'm reading and other stuff because that's where most of my opinions come from, just like hearing what others think. So that's not that interesting. I'm kind of like just adding another post that's already out there a lot. Versus if I were writing about it, I could say it in a way where people said, oh my God, that's such an interesting way to put that. I haven't thought about it that way. And I don't really have that for this because I haven't put hundreds of hours of thinking into it. But secondly, if I tweet something and someone comments and they're saying you're wrong because X, Y, and Z, I might look at that and be like, oh, you're right. I'm wrong about that. I have to like read more. And that's not, I want to, then don't tweet it. Right. And so the other, when I tweeted about politics 3-4 years ago and someone says you're wrong, I'm happy to, not that I'm always right. I might have been wrong, but at least I'll understand what they're saying. I'll know exactly where it fits into my argument. So it's really a reflection of what I'm doing right now, which is also a reflection of what I can be interesting about, what I can say something novel about. And then also, like, most of what I post is not on any kind of serious thing. I also just post things I think are interesting or funny or fun facts or cool graph I see. I like sharing those things because it's exactly the mechanism. Those are things that I would send to my friends. I would text to my friends. And the best of the things I would text to my friends, I would also tweet for the same reasons. It's like I have an urge to share something that delighted me or fascinated me. So, yeah, that's kind of how I use it.
Do you have a bullshit detection function that you're running? Like, are you worried about being wrong?
Well, I've learned this from my own mistakes, where this was in the height of Roe v. Wade being repealed, right? And it's the hottest topic in that moment, the most, incendiary topic. And I was like, I feel like people are not having the right argument. They're talking about a nationwide abortion ban versus not. And I'm like, that's not what this is about. It's about whatever. It's about states or not states. And so without putting out any opinion myself, I just made a chart. But I hadn't done a deep dive on it. I knew the basics, and it annoyed me that I saw the argument was not the right argument, so I put that out. And of course, it gets a ton of comments. That goes super viral, of course, both people who love it and hate it. But there are some people in the comments pointing things out, that nuance that I had missed. And I didn't like that. Because, like, I always want to be someone who is doing the more nuance than the average thing. That's really getting the nuances right. So the people who are black and white thinking, they might hate that, but that's okay. Because the really nuanced people are going to be like, nice. And in this case, a lot of the nuanced people showing me things I miss. And I've probably done 20 of those. Where I put something out and I realized after looking at the comments that the negative comments weren't just people who were being tribal or who disagreed with me, but people who I respect who were saying you're better than this in a way. And so that's what I don't want to do. If I put out an opinion, of course, some people are going to think it's wrong, but it's an opinion. If I put out facts, I want to be right. I do want to be right. So, because then you're stuck either deleting the tweet, which is embarrassing, or you reply to the tweet and be like, oh, I missed this. And then what are you doing? You're hurting your own reputation. Why are you even involved in this right now? So that is how I think about it.
I think that's good.
Reputation is everything, right? And so what I care about is my reputation with my readers, not with the wider world, the kind of people who already read my blog. And I know that they like this because they think that I think like them. They think that I have nuance in my thoughts and that I get to the facts and I research hard. And so reputation is very important to me. So yes, I always want, even though it's just tweets, I want them to reflect that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You're talking about calibrating your personal posting algorithm specifically to the audience that you care about most, right? So for our listeners here, there's this concept of audience capture, which I think is a really, really important concept for understanding the current craziness that we're exposed to online, which is that if you find an audience online suddenly, or gradually even, if you find an audience online, oftentimes we will kind of start building a model as to what that audience wants. And we will start changing our behavior to adhere to that particular audience. Mm-hmm. You've been lucky, or maybe very intentional around this, in that you've actually built an audience that appreciates critical thinking, that appreciates your ability to kind of speak to misconceptions or commonly held beliefs and being counter to, or being somewhat heterodox. You've built an audience there that you're speaking to, that you're primarily concerned about reputation-wise. Now, for other people that maybe didn't tack towards that type of audience, that tack towards more kind of radical or extreme audience, or that found themselves suddenly in this particular audience bubble that really wanted more of the salacious, the more outraged Tim, the more kind of crazy conspiratorial Tim, I'm wondering if there is a choice that one makes, because you've had a number of viral hits with your content in the past, and the demographics of those audiences for each one of those posts or like blog posts or tweets has been different, right? And like you have made some kind of conscious decision as to how you are attacking and grouping that audience. You're like, because there's a big multifaceted Venn diagram of different people with different dispositions that have listened to your thing, that have read your posts, that have seen your content. And you have decided that I don't want all of those people. I want a specific chunk of those people. I'm wondering if that was a real conscious process or was kind of more natural.
No, it was very conscious. I think I used to think this about, when I was younger, thinking about wanting to do writing or music or whatever. And I was thinking about music a lot. It's like, or films or whatever. If you make songs that you think can get popular, but it's not really your favorite music to write, you don't like it. Well, now your audience is the exact people who love the music that you're making, and the people who would have liked the music you really wanted to write don't know you or care about you. And you're now, like you said, captured by the wrong audience. So the truth is, I think everyone who has an audience is audience captured. And the goal isn't to not be audience captured, it's to be captured by the right audience. If you do the music you're really proud of, or you make the movies that you're really proud of, or for an actor, if you act in the films that you really are proud of, or for me, a writer, you write with the tone and the kind of opinions and whatever that is really true to you, you're going to be captured by the best possible audience, which is the audience who really likes the real you and the stuff that you're really proud of. And now when you stray from that, like any audience captured person, your audience is going to criticize you and pull you back. If I started and I was a hardcore left-winger or hardcore right-winger, which isn't really me, and it's not what I'd be proud of, but if I got followers that way. Now, when I stray out of that, I'm going to try to be my real self. I'm going to get yelled at for it. I'm going to get pulled back into this place I don't want to be. So when I started Wait But Why, I was very adamant about like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I want to curse in my posts and do silly stick figures. So right away, you lost a lot of like serious people, right? I want to write about a big wide variety of things. I'm not just a science writer. I'm not going to be just a funny writer or whatever. I want to sometimes be super emotional and serious about life, and I want to sometimes be really hardcore about like getting into tech, deep into a science or tech thing. And sometimes I just want to be silly. And so I would intentionally, rotate those things. So I keep elbowing out the niche, because if I just did 10 science articles in a row, now I have a bunch of people here. As soon as I do a funny article, they're saying, "What is this? This isn't you. This is what I come here for." So I did that, and now and on Twitter, like same thing, where I tried to be accurate, be nuanced, be myself. And so when I post something, like I said with the abortion chart, I got pulled by the audience. That audience captures making me my best self, because I'm captured by an audience that wants the best Tim as So likewise, if you do collect some people who are super tribal and they hate you for it, that's okay. I'm not captured by them. So because most of my readers aren't like that because of what I fostered. So I would say you're always audience capture, whether you're doing, again, writing, music, anything where you have an audience. A politician, right? You're always audience captured, and you should do things with as much kind of integrity as you can. Make this you're not your best self.
Yeah, there's something I think we're touching on here that is really important, which is that if you are trying to build an online presence, you really should not adhere to the defaults of your initial audience. You should try to actually have a model for the type of people that you want to engage with, and then try to build, try to be as specific as possible to appeal that particular audience, because a bunch of the time we'll get signal back from the algorithm that's like, you should actually be, focusing on this one particular area, which is like political content or bikinis or, whatever it is. And you should try to, as much as possible, adhere to the audience that you want to grow, that is as close as possible to who you are as an individual. A piece of this, and I think this is important, is that we have this sense of our audience, right? We have this kind of this composite of what our audience looks like. And one of the biggest and strangest functions of some of the craziness, I think, of the last 10 years in social media land was the composite got pretty skewed, I think, for most people. And that since we have this extremophile algorithm that's giving us back all this signal on the fringes, that a lot of people are like, oh, well, I guess this is or it's the audience I should adhere to, because there's a lot of people talking about these really difficult political topics, and they're being really extreme and really loud about them. And I might get canceled by some of these people. So they actually changed the composite of their audience to include a portion of those extremophiles who are then going to curtail the type of stuff that you will say, right? So it's almost like a phantom audience in some ways, or a phantom apparition of who is really out there that wants to hear what you're saying. I wrote a book about the dangers and problems of social media, so I got really fucking close to the mechanics. And the result of that is I don't really post on social media very much because I'm so close to the mechanics. And that's maybe to some of the detriment of my work, because so much of discovery is social media these days. So I probably should be posting more. I probably should be building a more accurate composite of my audience, that the kind of people I really want. But there is this kind of apparition out there. It's like, oh, if you say the wrong thing, that actually silences you. If you say the wrong thing, then you're in danger. Your reputation is in danger. So I think there's a valuable kind of meta strategy there that you're talking about, which is like don't pay attention to the audience that is likely going to be offended or upset by what you say necessarily. Because,
and by the way, when you start doing, first of all, there's a huge audience. There's a huge hunger for non-extreme stuff. As I said, those are the loudest people, but it's not actually the majority.
Right.
And so if you go for the extreme, you're actually going for a small group of people who are very well attended to. There's a million people competing for their attention. So I think it's actually just strategically better to not do that, first of all. And secondly, it's like, if you just start doing your thing, if you're doing stuff that is offensive to group A, is going to leave. If you notice that the people, I just noticed is certain people who have really built an audience where they're saying things that are offensive to one group, but they do it consistently. And guess what? You look at their comments and it's usually thoughtful people or people who just agree with them. But either way, they're not going to get consistent hate actually as much as you'd think, because they just don't have, those people don't follow them. So
Really?
it's like, if you just push through a little bit and be yourself for a while, the people who are offended by what you do, they're gone now. And it's not, I cannot imagine it's fun being a content creator who's scared of your audience, scared of your own audience, who has to constantly walk on eggshells around your own audience. It's like, what are you doing this for? You're not going to be your realist self. And now you're just I don't know, you found a way to make money basically and to get attention, but that's it really. That's what you're doing is and look, I mean, I'm sure that's fine for some people, but it's not something I have any interest in.
You're contorting yourself to fit in with an audience. Same way, like an indie star gets popular for a certain kind of pop music. I think music is a great analogy, right? An indie star like gets popular for a certain type of pop music, and they start making more pop music, and they fucking hate themselves.
Exactly. There's a lot of people out there who are making YouTube videos or music, and they say, yeah, like I wouldn't. I make trash. I make I would never send this to like good friends of mine. I hope they don't see it. It's almost like embarrassing.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I don't think I mean, maybe you can rise up with that and then pivot. Some people do that.
Will we have Radiohead without Creep, right? Like, that's a question. Like, would Radiohead be like possible in terms of the audience? And so there is some balance there, but it's an interesting question.
Or but I think that's hard to do. And I think unless there's only one way up, and then you can go to the left or right or pivots in another direction. Mm-hmm. Unless there's only one way up, which is probably there's not. Try doing your rise up in the first place to get your audience. Being true to yourself. That's ideal. That's definitely should be plan A. And it's, if you think the long game, it's like when I started writing about politics, a friend of mine was like, you have no haters right now. Why are you doing this? And it's true. But the way I viewed it is like, look, what I really do isn't non-political stuff. What I do is just myself. And I'm not usually thinking about politics that much, but right now I am. So I'm going to write about it, which is that's still the long game for me, is just being myself. And yeah, I'm going to turn off some people, but you'll gain other people that like you. And 20 years later, if you just keep doing that, you have an audience that really likes your body of work and respects that. And even the stuff they don't like, they've seen enough where they're there for you now. And so I think in general, I think it's good to just, to the stuff that you're talking to your friends about and you're really into it. Not in every case, but put that out. Do this. I think it's good to cater to an audience who you respect, an audience who you would, consider your friends would be part of it if they didn't know you.
Right. Yeah. I think that's good. I think it's interesting because there's then this whole new kind of industry of growth hackers on every platform these days, right? Of like people like, oh, you need to do this thing to be more like Mr. Beast or more like Joe Rogan or like all, and there's a whole kind of broad industry around that.
Mr. Beast got popular by being something different.
Right.
And now you can join the group of copycats who can feed off of that wake and ride the wave a little bit, but you are going to be, there's a ceiling on how popular you're probably going to get. Doing something that is fresh and different, which is, I think, is the way to become like Mr. Beast or Rogan or a lot of other people.
Yeah. What pieces of that are kind of like platonic truths that you need that are strategic or tactical ways that you absolutely should try to grow around versus the things that are actually closer to yourself. And I think it's really important, like that ick factor that you're talking about, like, I don't really feel good doing this kind of content. That's just super, super important to note. Tim, this has been awesome, man. I want to give you a chance to talk for a second or just like give me an update on what you're working on, what you're excited about, and anything you'd like to say for what is hopefully a thoughtful and curious audience.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about everything. I had a great time as always with you. I'm just the next thing I'll be like announcing is that I'm printing What's Our Problem finally. It was just audiobook and ebook for a while because I didn't want to deal with the delay that printing would cause. But a lot of people have asked about print, so now we're doing that. So excited about that to finally be able to hold the product of those years in my hand. And and right now I'm just head down in this other book, which hopefully will come out in somewhere early 2026.
Have a title yet?
Something like The Story of Everything, but we're still working on that. Broad.
small potatoes, really.
Very broad.
Very, very narrow, niche,
Yeah.
niche topic.
Yeah,
Awesome, dude. Well, dude, as always, it feels great to get a chance to catch up with you and talk about these issues. And let's do it again soon.
Would love to. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Into the Machine with Tobias Rose-Stockwell. If you enjoyed this, please do rate us on Apple Podcasts. It makes a huge difference in helping other people find the show. If you're interested in the ideas from this podcast, my book, Outrage Machine, was published by Hachette, and you can find my Substack at tobias.substack.com. Thank you for listening. I'm really grateful for the gift of your attention.